is a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and
I'm just trying to figure out what's in her mouth.
I just want to see him interview Francesco Accoli.
No, he's a good human being, is what he would say about himself, I'm sure.
Who's hosting this thing?
Take charge, Kevin, would you? Jesus.
First time we ever met those guys. That was the major drunken pub argument.
I think you guys are the worst.
I'm gonna have to probably watch some Canucks hockey, unfortunately.
Just making friends left, right, and center, and probably some enemies as well.
Tell him to shut up. He needs to hear that every once in a while.
Off to a good start.
All right. We are live.
It's okay to talk when it goes live.
It sure is. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast, Facebook.com, the Hockey Podcast, YouTube.com, the Hockey Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey. And of course, give us a like on Facebook. Give us a subscribe on YouTube, where we are currently at the Eric Carlson of subscribers right now, 65. And so we welcome those, and then subscribe to the audio. I must apologize. I did not get the audio up for our podcast and for the midweek intermission. I was a bit busy this week, so I will get those up as well. So, and you can subscribe and tell your friends about the audio as well. Good morning to Tyler.
Good morning, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. A little odd not having any Canucks hockey this weekend. I feel a little lost, I got to say. This many days between games is unusual this year.
Yes, very different, but it'll be a very busy week coming up with back-to-backs and other stuff. Chris, hello.
good morning.
How are things?
As good as they can be.
That's good to hear. I feel like you need a hug or something. Are you okay?
No, everything's fine. It's just living life through COVID as good as it can be.
Yeah.
True. Devin, hello.
Hey, guys. I'm doing pretty well. Leafs and Flames won yesterday. So, yeah, today is a beautiful sunny day in Calgary. It's 1 degree out, and, yeah, it's fantastic.
You know, it is warmer than what Connor McDavid's plus-minus was last night.
Oh.
Thank you. Here all night. How's it feel?
Not to mention without Matthews in the lineup, too.
Yes. And Freddie Anderson. And
That's
Freddie.
right.
Yeah.
And Jack Campbell in goal. Yeah. It was getting a shutout.
Yeah. Sean, hello.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Just dealing with we've had all kinds of weather here. Just quickly, we had snow this week. We've had rain. We've had sun. I feel like I'm living in Calgary, but I'm living in Burnaby.
Home away from home.
Home away from home. Yes, in some ways, yes. If you have questions, comments, everyone, please, we'll get to those as well as we go on. We've got quite a bit to get into, but we're going to start with the Canucks. Canucks did not play this weekend and are not playing this weekend. Probably a nice time to kind of just retract. But it looked like there was going to be some news according to Saturday, and then Jake with the Jake Virtanen rumors, and then Elliot Friedman trolled Canucks Twitter and let that all down and said that's not happening. Just stop. But it did bring up a topic that we do have our poll question up here about Jim Benning. I'm going to give Sean the floor. Sean, I will start with you. Sean told us he has something to say. We actually don't really know what he's going to say, so I'm responding off the cuff. So here we go. Sean, we present to you, Sean. I need some sort of music. Dun, dun, dun!
Well, yeah. After another shutout, 2 shutouts in the on this homestand with the Sprite jerseys. It got me thinking, and I've been teetering on the edge of my talking about sort of trying to keep a level keel on Jim Benning, but it kind of put me over the edge. And Jeff Merrick has a great saying for sports teams. You have to sell at least one of the following to your fans: success or hope. Right now, the Canucks are not selling any of that, even though there should still be hope. You need to be able to find a way to sell hope now, though. And right now, the only way you can do that is a change in GM. You look at Canucks fans on social media, there's so much doom, there's so much gloom, there's so much pessimism. It's because Jim Benning has created a team that does not have a good enough blue line, does not have a good enough depth in the bottom six, and has wasted good years of Bo Horvat's career, Brock Besser's career, and the final year of Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes on their ELCs is toast. I've named 4 good players that are a good core for any team, any of the other teams in this league, and Jim Benning has surrounded them with overpaid veterans who do not get the job done. The future of this team is still very bright with Petey, Besser, Horvat as the core, with Thatcher Demko stepping up, looking like a good, at least an average to better than average NHL starter, and still has a little bit of development to go. Niels Höglander stepped into this team and has become a spark plug and someone who they can add to the core. You've got Vasily Podkolzin coming in, who everyone is excited for because he does all the little things correct and is going to add to this team. But you have all this and you still can't build a proper team around them, and you still have massive holes. That's not acceptable. Even if you look at all those players, not other than Bo Horvat, they've all been drafted by this regime. They've all been drafted by Jim Benning and this management group. But you know what? They've chased out of town the head of amateur scouting that helped draft them all because they couldn't work together. Judd Brackett is gone. And that draft record isn't sparkling. Virtanen, McCann, Ulevy, all 3 of those players have superstars drafted right after them. Virtanen, Virtanen, you've got Nylander and Ehlers. McCann, you've got David Pasternak. He gets lost in the shuffle. Everyone talks about Virtanen and Hugh Levy with Tkachuk, but the Canucks drafted Jared McCann 1 spot before David Pasternak. And then traded him away for Eric Branson. You also look at the fact that the only defenseman that the Canucks, this management team, has drafted and turned into a full-time NHL player, Quinn Hughes, and he fell into their lap. Jim Benning should not be a part of the future of this Canucks team. It's time to move on. It's time to make a change. We can thank Jim Benning for bringing in the future core for this franchise, but it's time for a new GM. It's time for fresh set of eyes and a new approach. It is time for someone new to step in, clean up this salary mess that is hindering the Canucks' ability to build a team around this young group of players that look like that has 2 to 3 superstars. John Tortorella called the Canucks core stale when he was the head coach. This management team is stale. They've tried the same thing over and over, and to little success. They've had one. They made the playoffs in Benning's first year as GM, or did they?
Yeah.
Yes, they did. They made the playoffs, and then they were able to win the play-in round and 1 round in the actual playoffs last year in the bubble. That's the success that they've had, honest success that they've had under this regime. I understand that right now, this year is a weird year with no fans in the stands. There's no financial gain for making a move because there are no fans booing this team out of the arena. But you need to make a change. You need to not take the fans for granted and expect them to come back after this. The Canucks aren't as bad as their record suggests. They've deserved to get a couple more wins along the way, but they didn't. They did not get the results, and now the room for error is marginal at best. If not, there is no room for error. And there are bigger issues that are holding this team back, so that if they stay on this course and don't make a change, that you're going to be wasting away key years of this young core. And if you can't find a way to fix this, you're going to lose a lot of the fan base. Right now, the fan base is angry, and that means they're still engaged. The next step after this is apathy, where they don't give a fuck. And that's when you lose the fan base. And that's when, and if you don't make a change now or as soon as possible, that apathy stage is going to be when fans are allowed back in the stands. And you're not going to sell out. You're not going to get the revenue, the gate revenue that you need to be able to put a profit on it with this team. It's time for Jim Benning to be gone as GM of the Vancouver Canucks and to bring in someone new.
Yeah, so the question is, and we kicked this around a couple of weeks ago, who would you bring in if you've said enough with Jim Benning? And I don't want to argue with Sean, because I agree that 7 years, I think, has been enough time for any general manager in any market to make an impact. And it's been marginal at best. Sean laid it out, a couple playoff appearances. But if you kick around a bunch of names of people that we've heard that have been interested in other openings recently, there's been talk about Kevin Weeks. We've Pierre McGuire. I even tossed out Peter Chiarelli there, which got a negative reaction. So if you don't want somebody with experience, well, do you want somebody without experience? The Canucks have gone that route now with the coach. Benning's a first-time general manager. When they had Trevor Linden there, he was a first-time front office executive. Willie Desjardins was a first-time head coach in the NHL. So it's a little easier said than done. And then I think, ownership. Again, ownership. Ownership wants to, for whatever reason, it appears to me, a couple of things. They don't like the idea of tanking. They want to keep putting in experienced players at a premium to make the team competitive. They want a competitive team every year. Turns out to be a mediocre team in a lot of cases, but that's the goal. They don't want to tank and go scorched earth and throw a bunch of kids out there or plugs. They don't want to go that route. So changing general managers, I don't think is going to solve a lot of the problems that exist with the Canucks. Do you really think changing general managers is going to stop ownership's tendency from wanting to spend big bucks in free agency to get some sort of a known person onto the Canucks roster? Be careful what you wish for with that. If you get a new general manager that's not as strong in drafting and scouting, then have they really taken a step forward other than just giving the fans some sort of change that they're demanding? Now,
are they really that strong in drafting and scouting, though?
Well, it's been better than what they've had in the past, Sean. I mean, I know it's a low bar, but I mean, even a lot of Benning detractors have tipped their cap to the certain hits in the draft anyways. And then the idea of overpaying veterans to come to Canadian markets, I mean, they have to want to go there. I saw a tweet last night about Jason Spezza being great and it's only $700,000 for the Leafs. He wants to play there. He only wanted to play there. Some guys will want to come to Canadian markets, but only at a certain price. Is it really worth it to them? Well, at a certain price, yeah. There's a lot of scrutiny, a lot more going on. The weather's not that great. There's more cross-border travel, whatever.
Taxes.
They have their reasons. We hear about other sports, and it's really bad for the Raptors and the Blue Jays because they're the only team that's not in the United States, and they have the same issues too. They can get free agents to go there, George Springer, but you got to pay through the nose to get them. And in a salary cap system, that makes things difficult, and all the Canadian teams do this. I mean,
Winnipeg has not done it. Winnipeg did not sign someone that I think that they completely overpaid for. The biggest name that they have brought in as a free agent is Paul Stastny. Most of that has been draft and development.
Yeah. Now, for whatever reason in that market, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure or demand to take a step forward. I mean, they've been a pretty steady team over the years, but Well, we don't hear as much noise in Winnipeg. It's a smaller market. I guess that's part of it. I mean, you've got other teams where they're re-signing RFAs and paying like crazy dollars for them. So yes, I think it's time for a change in management, but I don't think people should start thinking that there's going to be miracles that come after that, because one, there is a big mess to clean up, and two, I think a lot of the issues still go back to ownership and wanting to do things a certain way, wanting to be very hands-on, and not willing to take a lot of years out of the playoffs. I mean, we looked at when the Aquilinis took over, the first year Dave Nonis missed the playoffs, he was fired. Then Mike Gillis came in, and it was progression. Took a pretty good team, made it better, got him to a Stanley Cup final. But still, he too had his list of questionable trades, no trade clauses handed out, few contracts. The Luongo thing really, really killed him. The goaltending situation really sunk Gillis. Soon as they were mathematically eliminated and the fans in the building were cheering fire Gillis, he was gone the next day. You mentioned fans, Sean. Imagine if there were fans in the building this year. Oh, man.
Watching the games in January?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the change would have happened already.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Would have happened.
Yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of the ownership, but you still have to have a competent GM who isn't going to give that extra year, that extra million that is now handcuffing this team. You can get 80% of what Jay Beagle brings to the Canucks for half the price at very most, and less term. You can find these tweener players who can come in and give it all. And if they're giving it all and they're making $900,000 to $1.5 million, and they're not signed for 3 to 4 years, the fans are going to get behind these players. The fans are not going to shit on them.
This is what I want to know, is why there's reluctance to try some more people out of their system. I mean, Zach McEwen's getting scratched right now in favor of what? Like play the guy. He works hard. He's affordable. That's just one example. That's where I wonder a little bit. You got to remember, if you don't sign free agents to fill holes on your roster, then you're plucking guys out of the AHL. And if it's thin down there, now you got bigger problems, right? Like you can't just say, well, we'll play somebody else. Who? That's always the thing, and then as far as these signings, if they didn't sign the likes of Beagle or Louis Eriksson or whoever, what would have been what would they have gone with instead? We don't know. We don't know what the options were on the table.
They have to be better than those two. I'm a big Jay Beagle fan for what he brings as a fourth line center, but you don't pay a fourth line center $3 million for 4 years. You do not pay, the Louis Eriksson signing was an absolute debacle, and no one saw. Maybe a few people saw it coming, but they didn't sign him to be what he is. I get that, but that's a mistake, and that's an egregious mistake that someone has to answer for.
Well,
and is that the point?
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen enough of that deal. We're into year 5 of that contract now, and the general manager has remained. I mean, that's got ownership's fingerprints all over it, as far as I'm concerned. So
that's a great point. And from the ownership standpoint, it seems like they're just looking for a yes man type of general manager. Oh, you want me to do this? Okay, sure. They're just looking for a figurehead to put in front of them. But yeah, their fingerprints are all over Jim Benning, and Jim Benning is just their puppet.
And the fact they haven't bought out Louis Eriksson, I think it just sort of reaffirms that they want to save face on it. If ownership buys out Louis Eriksson, that's waving the white flag and saying we give up. We made a mistake. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, there's nothing that Sean said that I disagree with. Really, I mean. I think we've talked about this with Bick and Jamie. I mean, it's time. It is time for Benning to move on. And there's been a lot of mistakes, and there's just, I think, to me, the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems is look at what the Leafs did. Yes, they were able to get Jason Spezza to sign for $700,000 because guys like Jason Spezza, Wayne Simmons, Joe Thornton wanted to be there. But they were also able to create some cap space when the new regime came in, and when this whole before the Matthews, Lou Lamoriello came in, and before Kyle Dubas came in, and Devin can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, they were in cap hell. They were pretty much like, they had contracts that they had to do some creative things. I mean, they had to trade Patrick Marleau for a first round draft pick in order to say, can you get this guy out of here? They had to give up a first round draft pick for someone to take the Patrick Marleau contract. So I think that it's not only for me the signings that are the problem, it's the lack of, and I get that you're handcuffed in some ways, but you've handcuffed yourself and you haven't found a creative solution to get out of it.
And Tyler, you asked who they should sign instead of, say, like a Jay Beagle. They made a trade in the 17-18 season where they traded Jordan Subban for Nick Dowd. And then they let Nick Dowd hit free agency. He went to Washington and replaced Jay Beagle. And in those 3 seasons, Jay Beagle in 136 games has 6 goals and 26 points and is a -18.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big problems they've had with the veterans now is that they've really fallen off here this year, and they didn't foresee that coming. And lack of vision is something that needs to be placed on management. I mean, that's the job, is to have vision, right, and be able to forecast the future. You can't predict the future. Nobody has a crystal ball, but you should be able to forecast kind of the way things are going with what you have. And they've severely miscalculated that. That is more the issue than individual deals when you've got the owner wanting to spend to the cap, right? And now they're spending wisely, and then there's just spending, and they're not really spending wisely, obviously.
Exactly, and that's my point. Is there's spending the cap is one thing, but if you're spending the cap like completely for useless deals or completely overpaid deals, it's counterproductive. But back to Nick Dowd, in those 3 seasons, he played 140 games, put up 18 goals and 42 points, and was a +23. Yes, the Capitals were a better team than the Canucks, but Nick Dowd signed in those 3 years. He made less than Jay Beagle made in 1 year, and that's my point. Is they overpaid for players just. If they're paying players just because we kind of need to spend to the cap because that's what the owners want, no, that's wrong. That's not how you GM. That's not how you manage a team. You want a GM who can go in there and say, yes, I understand that you want us to spend to the cap, for Francesco, because you want to be competitive, but this year, for these next 2 years, we need to not do that. We need to make sure that we're not overpaying, so that when these players come of age and are part of our core, we can surround them with the players that you're looking us to add now when they're not ready. And then now you're hampering the team in the future. And there are players out there that can bring what Jay Beagle brings, bring what Antoine Roussel brings, bring what Brandon Sutter brings, bring what Louis Eriksson brings, for significantly less money and significantly less term. And as much as you guys know me, I've been towing the line on giving Benning the credit when I think it's due and everything. But there's 2 major issues that are now completely hindering the ability for this team to go forwards. One, there's a complete lack of vision and communication from Jim Benning on what he's trying to do, and it's been that from day one. When it was with him and Linden, they could not give a proper, they could not communicate properly and say the same vision when they talked to the media. And then afterwards, you had no idea what Benning was up to, and what he was trying to do and what type of team he was trying to build. 1 year it was meat and potatoes. 1 year it was speed and skill. He's chasing. He doesn't have a plan. He's chasing.
Yeah, they just want to keep swapping out pieces. Yeah. Now the thing is, we talk about the core. We all like the core. Is the core as good as we thought it would be? Is the core as good as management thought it would be? I think that's something to be concerned about as well.
Are we still talking about the Canucks, or
Yeah.
this is Flames now?
Yeah, there's some parallels here between the two jerseys, but
because if that's the case, right? Like if they were projecting the core to be doing more than it is now, then all these other things are, that's an issue, but it maybe not the biggest issue. So a lot of things on the table here for the Canucks to consider. But again, as far as getting other players, they have to want to go there affordably, or free agency is just not going to help them very much. And you gotta wonder what is the Canucks organization's reputation with free agents and with player agents out there. I suspect it's not that great.
But
So
they've been able to. But
who's going to offer the discount?
But if they've been historically been able to get free agents to come there, Dan Hamhuis came there.
Yeah, Kevin, when the team was good, when they were a contender.
Okay, but you still were able to get.
Edmonton can bring in free agents too if they look like a contender.
You still were able to. Okay, like I'm not. Put away the money side of this. You still found a way to get Jay Beagle to come there. Thomas Vanek went there. Travis Hamonic took a PTO there when everyone thought he was going to go to Winnipeg. There's been free agents that have ended up there. So I don't think that it's a reputation of that. I don't know if that's that reputation. To me, if you want to do a Flames comparison here quickly, that the year that the Canucks signed Beagle, Roussel, and Dr. Tim Schaller, the Flames signed Derek Ryan, Alan Klein, and Auston Czarnik. And I'm not like Auston Czarnik didn't work out. Alan Klein, I think, was misused in Calgary a little bit, and Derek Ryan, we know what Derek Ryan is, but to me, I think the Canucks were a little bit too late on picking up sort of the bargain basement guys. That's what, I'm with Sean, they should have done that. And I wonder within the bargain basement, sort of give me that chance to play for 1 year to prove it deal.
Yeah.
That's where Vancouver, I think, has become weak. Like if you're Tyson Barrie, as an example, I mean, you've got your 1 year, your prove it deal. Someone is going to take a chance on Tyson Barrie next year because he's been given an opportunity to play and he's done okay. I think that he's a guy that someone is going to sign a contract for. Is he a top 4 defenseman on most teams? I don't think so, but someone's going to take a chance. And I don't know if Vancouver has had that opportunity for the guys to have that prove it deal because you're stuck with these Beagles, these Sutters, these Ericssons, and they seem committed because they've paid so much money to them not to give it to the prove it and that's that lack of creativity that I think that Benning is lacked. And there's been opportunities to do that. And I think that from the Canucks fan base, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn that there's been a lack of creativity from what Benning has done.
Yeah, I think you could say that. But I mean, but are we sitting here thinking that they haven't tried to get those bargain basement deals?
Well, because Nick Dowd signed for 1 year at $650. That's bare minimum, and right? That's
and exactly, and that's what I'm saying is the fact that they felt that they had the Jim Benning felt that he had to go out and overpay for Jay Beagle as opposed to getting a fourth line center for $650 or $750 under $1 million.
Yeah,
to do the exact same thing.
Except Jay Beagle was a recent Stanley Cup winner, and if you're the owner and you see that and he's available, it's entirely plausible to me that he's telling Jim Benning, go and sign Jay Beagle.
But at that point, you have to bite back and say, but look at this. But Jim Benning doesn't have the vision and the ability to do that.
I mean, you can bite back against Frankie, I guess, and see how that goes. That's the thing, right? I'm not saying that is. I don't know that is fact, but it sure appears that way to me when you look at them trying to bring in namer players at high cost to try and push the team forward. There's no vision there. It's just trying to plug in some namers. I mean, we've seen this with other organizations in the past too, and it hasn't worked. But that's what we're seeing.
And if this is legit more of an ownership issue, an Aquilini's issue, then this message is for Francesco Aquilini and the family. Get the fuck out of the offices of your GM and the team, and let them run the team. Because if Tyler's right and this is their issue, and this is an issue because there's too much meddling, get the fuck out. Because I understand that they want to win a Stanley Cup for Vancouver. They are a very passionate family that want to win. But you are not a GM. You do not know the ins and outs of that, and you're hurting this team more than you're helping it. Get the fuck out.
I think that's the message, right? And then we talked before. You mentioned before in your rant there, Sean, about taking the fans for granted. I mean, we go back to the Mike Gillis years, and they had the Stanley Cup run, and then it started regressing after that, there was starting to see some empty seats. The sellout streak had ended, and yet no lowering of the ticket price. It just kept taking the fans for granted until there were a lot of empty seats visible on TV in the lower bowl before things changed, right? And that got the owner's attention. So yeah, that's my biggest frustration is if you're going to bring in anybody, I mean, you got to let them do their job. And I don't know. We just haven't seen much evidence of that in this ownership group. And, we go back to the Luongo Schneider thing. I mean, how much of that whole mess was driven by ownership? I mean, I could definitely see ownership sort of turning on Roberto Luongo, and then you had that mess. And it's like, well, Mike Gillis is a smart guy. Do you think he really wanted that mess? Do you think he was pushing that whole debacle? You have to really think about that.
Yeah, I think both Sean and Tyler have had very valid points as far as like where you guys think the core of the issue is. And I am in full agreement. I am not going to argue you guys on either of those points. The question that I have is for the next guy. So let's say we do get rid of Benning and we move forward. They're not going to be able to magically make these shitty contracts disappear. They're going to have to wait out on some of them. Obviously, you can buy some out. But like what quick fixes are we expecting from the new GM, and also the realistic expectations of like, we don't know when this next draft is going to be. We don't know exactly what the Seattle Kraken are planning on doing with the expansion draft. Like, how do we best set up that next GM for success and still allow him to be able to live up to the high expectations that Canucks Twitter has?
Which is why you need to make the move now. Because the more runway you give that new GM to set yourself up for the expansion draft, for whenever the entry draft is, for the off season, and to build the confidence in this fan base up a little bit, the better. If you wait till the off season and then you bring in some guy who's going to have to rush to make sure that he understands what the team is, who he's protecting in the expansion draft, and then trying to figure out the entry draft if it happens this offseason, that's too much. The earlier they make the move, the better. Because not only you give all that runway to the GM, but also it's a fresh face. Right now, Canucks Twitter, Canucks social media, Canucks fans are all doing the same thing. They're yelling and screaming about the Sutter, the Beagle contract, the Roussel contract, the Ferland contract, the Myers contract, the Eriksson contract. All these contracts and all these players that are hindering the ability to be able to build a team around this young core. And the only reason they're focused so much about them, is because the GM who brought all these players in, whether via trade, UFA, or whatever, is still here. You move on to a new GM, all that talk will still be in the background, but it won't be in the foreground, and people are going to start looking forwards. You want the fan base looking forwards to what this core could be, not looking backwards at all the mistakes that this GM has made.
And I agree.
My question though, like initially though, was to Sean, was not the timing of it. Like, let's say we do that change right now. What are we expecting of this new GM to be able to give that hope and positivity to Canucks fans? Mm-hmm. Like, what moves could that new prospective GM make to make up for the screw-ups of Jim Benning? that was more so what I was trying to get at with the question. Sorry, Kevin.
Well, I don't think that you hire a GM you're not hiring a GM to fix necessarily fix the
He's going to have to do some cleaning up, though.
Yes, of course. But that, to me, you're bringing in the other reason I think you need to bring someone in pretty quick here is to me, the trade. When's the official trade deadline?
April something. I can't remember what date.
It's mid-April because it's
early April. Yeah.
The reality is the trade deadline for Canadian teams is mid-March. That's just the reality of the situation. Is you're not making a trade on April 1st to get someone in here. So you got to start making these. Okay, so I think for Canadian teams that trade deadline is the end of March because you still have that 2-week quarantine that you're going to need to deal with. As Corey Hurst said, a general manager change is not good, and Kevin B actually even said it too. I think it's not going to change the dressing room, but what I think it's going to do is it starts. The problem here is, and maybe Sean, you can pull up the betting pool. The problem here is the plan, and it just developing and preparing what is the plan, and start planning all of these things. Create scenarios in this situation. You almost need someone there that has the ability to figure out what are the Kraken going to do. Like if I am the Seattle Kraken, what am I going to do in expansion drafts? And start thinking a little bit ahead. I think for most Canucks fans, this season's already lost, which is frustrating, but it's already lost. I don't think that a lot of Canuck fans are expecting, if they get into the playoffs, at best it's 4th place. But
I mean, it was referred to earlier that there's not much margin for error left. No, I mean, I think we're past that. It's not going to happen
now. It's not going to happen. I think the way that series went against the Oilers, I don't see it right now. But it's just kind of deciding at this point who are the players you want to go to war with, pardon the pun, or go to battle with, and who you think is time to go. And start planning ahead. That's the problem. Is there has been no plan. Sean has said Benning has been chasing the game. You need someone that is starting to get ahead of the game, and that's why I think now is the time to make the Benning move. The Travis Green, this puts Travis Green in a bigger, more awkward situation. But maybe from a general manager's perspective, you look at what Travis Green does. And maybe that relationship between you, GM, whoever you're bringing in, and Travis Green changes. Because we talked about this with Vic and Jamie when we did Canucks After Dark on Wednesday. It's weird to me that Green hasn't signed that contract, and I think it's partially because Travis Green is sort of betting on himself. But to me, I'll be honest. If Travis Green leaves this organization, this is a huge setback for the Canucks. It's going to be really hard to bring someone that's going to be as good of a coach as Travis Green into this organization. I think Green has developed a relationship. I know that the record isn't looking good now, but he's had crap to deal with. And I think it would be a big mistake to let go of Travis Green, but I think a new GM possibly could keep him in here.
Yeah, I like Travis Green, and I think earlier in the season, some of what was going on the ice could be attributed to coaching, but not now. I mean, their game has cleaned up quite a bit. They just simply aren't good enough, and I mean, the coach is only going to be as good as the team that he has. But the not good enough, I mean, that's we can pick on the bottom 6, and we can pick on goalies or certain D-men or depth players or whatever. The not good enough includes the core players as well. It has. I was expecting more this season out of Elias Pettersson in particular, but everybody. I mean, Quinn Hughes is not what we saw last year. The hope is that they will bounce back after this year. It's an odd season and everything, but that's part of the problem too. Like, I know we like the core, but we can't let them off the hook for some of this as well. The performance has left lots to be desired.
And how much of that is just puck luck? Because let's say every single post that PD has hit this season goes in. We're not talking about PD.
Yeah, he probably won a few more games if that's the case, right? But
yeah,
it's sports for you. There's a lot of what ifs.
Fraction of an inch.
Tyler is right. Everyone hasn't been good enough. They had an absolute atrocious start. I think there was a complete lack of understanding what Chris Tanev specifically brought. Markstrom as well, but I still think the biggest loss was Chris Tanev. They're starting to figure it out now. Jordy Benn's been a nice revelation. Hopefully they can turn him into some assets at the deadline. I would love to see them be able to do that. But I just I never got to actually really talk about this when we were talking with Bick and Jamie. I think the relationship between Travis Green and Jim Benning was really good up until this offseason when Jim Benning really screwed the pooch with running out of time to get Toffoli back, not bringing Tanev back.
Yeah, what was that answer? Hey, that was.
And again, it comes back to communication with Jim Benning. Yeah. Like, he always shoots himself in the foot. Remember, he got fined for tampering because he went out and said we're going after PK Subban and someone else. I can't remember who it was.
Milan Lucic. He said he was going after Lucic before the Edmonton Oilers had a parade for him.
Yeah, and then, but I'm just like, I that's one of the biggest problems with Jim Benning, and it's not even the biggest problem. Mm-hmm. If Jim Benning had a plan and stuck to it and just was a horrible communicator, they'd be in a much better position. But he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't execute whatever his plan is well, and he communicates it horribly. And I've always been like, the communications was horrible with this regime. And I'm at my wit's end here. Like, I'm a diehard Canucks fan, as you can tell. Everyone knows I get emotional about this team, and I'm at the wit's end because they have the core to do it. They have the pieces in place to be able to build around, and the team that they built around is crap.
Okay, I just want to ask a question though, a legitimate question, and this is looking just back between the Oilers and the Canucks. Core between the Oilers core and Canucks core, and I understand that the Oilers core has McDavid and Draisaitl, which are, two of the top 3 players in the world here. Who has the better core?
Well, I think the Canucks have the more well-rounded core, but clearly right now, in terms of getting it done, and that's what counts in professional sports, it's Edmonton. I mean, their guys are performing to expectations. I think McDavid's actually picked it up a notch this year after having not a step back last year, but he was coming off the injury and wasn't quite the same. But I mean, he's looking great this year. Yes, it is against other Canadian teams. If he was playing some tougher competition elsewhere in the NHL, maybe we'd see it differently. But they're getting it done. That core there is getting it done. Jesse Puljujärvi's been a revelation for them and really truly given them two forward lines that McDavid and Draisaitl can each anchor. With the Canucks, it's maybe more well-rounded in terms of their games, but there's a lot of losses. Just not enough getting it done. Chris pointed out the amount of iron that Petey's hit, and then the what ifs with that. Well, put it in the net, Petey. Figure it out. I mean, that's the thing. It has to. At some point, it's not to steal the Josh Donaldson quote. Okay, it's not the try league; it's the get it done league, and that's So if you look at Edmonton, their core is getting it done.
The only argument I would say against that, though, is the fact they have had a horrible team for how many years now, whereas we're, year 7 into this rebuild?
Okay, and then again, look at ownership there. I mean, Daryl Cates, he keeps doing the same thing. Up until more recently with Ken Holland, but before that, it was constantly putting in former Oilers legends, buddies of his, to run the team, and he's allowed that. That's what he's wanted. And as far as taking the fans for granted, in Edmonton, they let him do it. They keep going. At least in Vancouver, they stopped going.
Yeah, but you got Connor McDavid that you're buying a ticket for.
Before that, Kevin, it was the same thing before that.
Yeah. I think Ken Holland has pushed, to be fair there, Ken Holland has pushed back on ownership. And there does seem to be a bit of a culture shift in Edmonton going on right now.
Yeah, well, Ken Holland's got a lot more credibility than any of the other guys that Daryl Cates has put in there. And
that's true.
Maybe Daryl's getting older and softer and more willing to listen. I don't know. That there is definitely a difference though with Ken Holland, but again, look at his resume compared to everybody else's, and it's pretty strong.
And anyone who watches the Edmonton situation, it's about damn time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And does anyone else? Everyone, I'd like to hear everyone else. Do you think that who has the better core, Oilers or Canucks?
Well, it's down to it's down to two. Like either you have McDavid or Draisaitl, and then you have, like Tyler said it, you have a well-rounded core. I mean, you do have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins up there. You have Darnell Nurse, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. But me personally, I would rather take Vancouver Canucks core over Edmonton. You have two good players, but I'd rather have more depth within the organization than what they have up there. And let alone, the reason why they're doing so well right now as well is because Mike Smith decided to show up. And that's pretty much what is happening up there within the past, 5 or 6 games. Other than one game, he got shell-shocked with 6 goals, but otherwise he's played really well. So if they didn't have that goaltending, it might be a different story.
And that's why right now I think you do have to go Oilers just because of McDavid and Draisaitl. But the one thing the Canucks have over, like, you look at all these like rebuilds throughout the years, one thing that the Canucks have over most of them, they've got Thatcher Demko. They've got the goaltender of the future. They've got someone who a goalie that can grow with them with this core. You look at Oilers have been trying to find that goalie for years. Even the Flames, they went out and spent big money on Jacob Marchand because they could not find that goalie elsewhere. So I think if the Canucks can figure this shit out and actually surround this team with proper players, I think you could make a case for the Canucks. But right now, as the Oilers are getting it done, McDavid and Draisaitl are getting it done.
Yeah.
As far as a pure talent evaluation, I would probably have to agree with everyone else and say Edmonton. But for the same reasons that Dev said, like, I would probably still choose Vancouver's core just due to the well-roundedness of what they all bring together as a cohesive unit, as opposed to just having 2 league leaders and then a bunch of spare parts that essentially help them get it done up there in Edmonton.
Okay, so in terms of the bottom 6, bottom 4, the depth guys between the Canucks and the Oilers, who do you think is better?
The defense is the Oilers. They've got a decent. They finally built a blue line that is respectable. And then their bottom 6. Kyle Turris has not turned out, but they still have other players that have stepped up, and the Canucks have not. The Canucks bottom 6 has not stepped up. Adam Gaudette, yeah, he's had shitty puck luck, but again, we need results. Zach McEwen's had a couple good games, but we need more from him. Jake Virtanen, like they're looking at trading him, and they can't even do that.
Yeah,
like it's just the Oilers depth players are getting it done while the Canucks aren't.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Yeah,
Chris asked. Oh, go ahead, Devin.
Josh Archibald up there. He's on the 4th line. Talk about a heart and soul guy. If he's ever available, a team would snap him up instantly. He hits at least 5 to 6 times a game. PK, he's amazing. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one guy. I mean, you have Jujhar Khaira, Tyler Ennis, who's been bouncing around between teams. I would take Edmonton's over Vancouver's. With that said, though, the tenure of Vancouver's bottom 6 is more prominent. So it might be a wash for me, actually.
I would take Edmonton's, actually. Sorry, just quickly. I would take Edmonton's. This is where I think if you want an example of where Jim Benning screwed up, and Edmonton was in cap hell. Edmonton's probably still in cap hell, but he figured out a way to bring in a Josh Arch. I mean, Athanasiou that trade didn't work out. Kyle Turris hasn't worked out. But that's like they brought Callis Chason in a PTO, and he's like a 3rd liner now. James Neal, whatever. Gaetan Haas gives him 4 good 4th line minutes, and I don't think you're paying him that much. So that I think is that the Oilers I would say have the edge there for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely getting something out of those depth players. Like Haas is a good one that you bring up. Chris asked earlier about, what does the next guy do that comes in, and we referred Chris to some cleaning up that has to happen. Well, I mean, I'll just point out a few things. We talked about this in the group chat as well. After this season, it's not as dire in terms of cap hit disasters for the Canucks. So after this season, they'll be into the final year of the Luongo cap recapture. They'll only have one more year left of Louis Eriksson, and I think all his bonuses and everything are paid after this season. So then I'll
He's
buy
got
out.
$1 million of signing bonus for next season, and then $3 million of actual salary.
Yeah, I think if they're going to do the buyout, it'll be in this upcoming offseason, or they'll just ride it out with him for the final year. Sven Berchi's done after this season, and the cap hit for the Ryan Spooner buyout is off the books after this season. So it starts looking a lot better cap-wise. Yes, there is Petey and Hughes to re-sign, but
don't forget Demko
and Demko. But with Petey and Hughes in particular, I mean, the way they're performing right now, should be able to get them re-signed affordably, kind of like they did with Brock Besser. So, so whoever comes in next, has some wiggle room, has the ability to turn things around. But again, do we let the current GM finish out the season, or do you get his hands off the controls before the trade deadline? I think that's a good question, and I think it's game to game at this point. If you're the owner and you think for sure that the playoffs are out of reach, then maybe you make the move. We don't know where he's at with that. The last time we heard was a few weeks ago, and it was a vote of confidence.
And you got to think that if they are having conversations with other people to take over as GM, that those candidates would be verse and show the plan to the Aquilinis and be like, this is what we think we should do. Like, it's not like they're going to just be like, oh, well, I'm hired now. Awesome. Now what do I do? They'll have a plan going into it.
The question is, does ownership want to listen to a proposal that takes, a long period of time to get there, right? Like,
I was going to say a more patient approach.
Yeah, the ownership the only plan they seem to like is, keep improving the team and go for the cup ASAP. I mean, that's what happened when Mike Gillis came in, and it was take a pretty good team and let's go for that Stanley Cup. And God bless them, they almost did it. But then after that, their plan for sort of restocking the shelves and all that was a mess. It was a total disaster. There was no plan for that. And then the new GM comes in, Jim Benning, makes the playoffs the first year. So the owner's got to be happy with that. And then it just is a continuation of just trying to swap pieces to keep going for a playoff spot. So nothing's really changed there over the length of time in this ownership. So is a new general manager going to be able to come in, propose taking a patient approach to rebuild again, or that's not going to sell with the owner.
It doesn't have to be that long, but if I'm coming in, I'm saying, look, we have this cap mess that we have to work through. I'm going to do my best to try and get as much of this cap mess fixed this off season, but there's no promises that it's going to happen, and we're going to have to go after some bargain players to make this work. Yeah, and sometimes maybe that helps. Maybe that helps this team because you got players who are chomping at the bit to make the money in their next contract. And if you can sell it like that, then you can then say the Canucks, even if they're just battling for a playoff spot next year and take it, and all the young core are taking steps back forwards, that's selling hope.
Yeah,
that's selling hope. That's selling to the fan base that this team is growing. What we saw in the bubble was great and everything, and we needed that as Canucks fans. We needed that.
Yeah.
But the problem is they're taking a gigantic step backwards. I think we all said that maybe they would take a step backwards, but not this big. No. Not this big.
Well, nobody, right from Francesco Aquilini down to us, saw it being like that.
But I also thought that the Canucks would actually get at least one of those big three free agents signed, and Jim Benning didn't get it done. And he decided to go after. He decided to spend money on do other things, and then say he ran out of time. No, I'm sorry. That's a pathetic excuse. Like, it's time for a new voice, and even if it's just like the new GM coming in saying exactly what I said that he would say to the Aquilinis. We have some cap issues that we have to fix. We're going to do our best to clear up as much of it as possible this summer. And we're going to try and bring in some younger players and grow from that way. And then once that's done, we're going to look at adding to this team once we're able to. And if you sell that if you have a new GM come in and sell that to the fans, they're going to listen. They're going to back him. They're going to back that GM. Jim Benning comes out. Chance. Yeah, Jim Benning comes out and says that. There's no confidence that he can do that.
Yeah, nobody's going to believe that.
Jim Benning has to beg and plead for every penny spent since this offseason because he's wasted money on the Jay Beagles, on the Antoine Roussel's, on the Michael Furlans. He is, like, if you look at the reports coming out about the Jake Virtanen trade, that is potential. They've hit a wall because Aquilini doesn't think is basically saying to Jim, I'm not taking on more bad money because of you.
Yeah, that whole situation too. I mean, it was yesterday. It was pretty much. I was watching Canucks Twitter. It was like refresh. Did this happen? And of course, Elliot Friedman had to go on the headlines in the second intermission and just tell us all no, not happening. And then did the comparisons like you're not getting Danton Heinen for Jake Virtanen. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. And whatever that is, that situation happens. We'll have to see. Yeah, there hasn't been anything here that I really would disagree with. I think everybody knows now that there's a time of change and it's time to sell some sort of hope. And it's hard not to come through these 4 games with Winnipeg and Edmonton, 2 teams that you thought you were pretty close to in this North Division, and not win one game. You blew leads. You blew a 3-0 lead, and then you got shut out for 5 straight periods on Mike Smith. I don't know. I think, yeah. I
put it on Twitter on I think after the game on Thursday. I mean, it's hard. I don't think there's been a point where it's felt this bad prior to that loss against Edmonton on Thursday. I mean that. Yeah, it's there isn't much hope being sold, and when fans are allowed to come back, I mean, we're all in agreement here. You can't sell this and expect them to come back. Like, I mean, that's just not going to work,
especially with the economy the way it is.
Yeah,
you think that people in Vancouver are going to be able to afford a Canucks like with the budget of the way that it is, that they're going to go to Rogers Arena here and say, hey, let's go and spend $100 to watch this? No.
Yeah. So as far as making a move, I mean, that'll push ownership into making a change. Not so much what the winning percentage looks like, but are the fans going to come back and watch this?
Yeah. And I have been on the side that I'm not as convinced as everyone else that they're going to come back in droves.
Yeah.
But it'll come down to what this team looks like when that happens. And in my rant, I said that right now the fan base is angry and pissed off and wants change. If you don't make that change, that apathy is going to set in right when tickets are available, and you could go back and watch this team.
Yeah.
And if we can move on to the Jake Virtanen rumors. Like there's more information coming out. They're balking at taking salary back. If there's a new GM in taking the reins, is that an issue? Can he actually sell it to Aquilini? I think he could. Right now, Aquilini does not have any faith that Jim Benning can make a trade and can make a move where there's like a big salary implications and real money implications that he can make it work. And if that's the case, get rid of him. Find someone else.
I mean, there's the one obvious reason why that wouldn't be happening, of course. It's the C word, being cheap. But as we get closer to the end of the season, I mean, paying a general manager or several managers to not work for you for a quarter of the season is a little more, feasible if you're the owner with budgetary constraints at this point. Again, just speculating, but that would be one reason why there hasn't been a change yet.
Here, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you throw Jake Virtanen on waivers?
After re-signing him in the offseason, I don't think he can do that.
I think you can. He hasn't played good enough.
But the likelihood of him clearing is pretty. It's there. It's a good likelihood.
He'll clear. He'd clear.
Yeah,
he would totally clear. But maybe it wakes him up. Maybe it finally goes, oh shit, I'm not untouchable anymore.
Yeah.
If that's going to wake him up, that's atrocious. There's been so many wake up calls for him.
Yeah,
that he would be able to bounce back and try and actually care and actually give a shit. Then it just doesn't really make sense to me that would be the wake up call. I think that you do it just to say fuck you to him and to go from there. Honestly, throughout this entire thing, it's just of Jake Virtanen's career with the Canucks. It's always been, oh, well, what if this happens? Oh, what if this happens? It's down to him, and he doesn't care.
I mean, they must think there's value in him because Sean shared the lines from practice here today, and they have Virtanen skating with Pearson and Horvat. So I mean, they're trying to showcase him to make a move, clearly. So they must think there is a trade market out there for them. So why would you waive him? You can't. You're not going to do that.
Yes,
Louis Eriksson is almost, he's not totally useless, but clearly if you put him on waivers, nobody's going to take him. Like, that's a pretty safe move to make. It's not as safe to make with Jake Virtanen. You never know which team, and depending on what the waiver priority is, would make a claim.
What? Wait, what? Hold on, Tyler. What? Yeah. What are you freaking? Why would anyone freak out that Jake Virtanen is not on this team? He's got one goal.
No,
what
I know.
He exactly contributed.
I know.
Oh my gosh, it'd be terrible that someone claimed Jake Virtanen.
Well, if they think there's a trademark,
I'd be like celebrate. Let's have a party.
So you want to just give him away?
You're not
at this point.
For him.
His cap is also not helping things.
No. But it's very obvious that they think there's a trade to be made out there for him. So that this management team has been getting sewered all the time over bad trades, and now you're advocating giving a guy away on waivers potentially.
But that's an extra 2.5. That's an almost $3 million in cap that they can take off the books for next year.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that they would get back rumored wise is not exactly some want him as a third line center, but it's not exactly like he's going to be an earth changer.
They've already done a lot of losing assets for nothing. I'm not going to support the idea of putting a guy on waiver that could get claimed for nothing.
I'm kind of with Tyler on this. Like, I understand the argument for putting him on waivers. I just think the timing is not right to make that move right now.
Can I
What's
bring
wrong
another
with the timing?
What has he brought to the team? They have literally put this guy on the number one line twice.
I mean, timing in the sense that they're
goal.
I meant timing in the sense that they're clearly trying to showcase him for a trade. Clearly, there's traction for a potential trade to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't have him on the first line right now.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean, timing wise. Like, yes, his play qualifies him for being waived. I am in full agreement there. It's just timing wise, if you're trying to make a trade, you're being told that there's a market for it and you're trying to showcase them, is not the time to put them on waivers and give them away for free.
You want to put somebody on waivers? I'm so done with Antoine Roussel. You want to make that argument with Roussel? I'm 100% on board with that one.
Let's put the entire team on waivers. Come on,
waive them all.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Waive them all.
But look, they're in the situation they're in. If there is a trade to be had, they have to entertain that. The waivers is a last resort. Clearly,
so waivers would make more sense after the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm. I'm done. I agree with you with Rochelle, Tyler. I'm done with him.
You talk about guys that don't score. He doesn't contribute anything offensively. The only time we notice him is when he's doing something stupid, giving the puck away, bad penalties. And I don't know how he keeps getting a spot. How does he keep getting a spot? How is he playing and not Zach McEwen?
Like, yeah, that is bizarre to me. And he's not been a pest. Like, he's been the opposite of a pest.
Well, he's been a pest, but not to the opposing team.
He's been a pest to the Canucks.
I mean, that roughing penalty against Puyarvi a few games ago is just the dumbest shit I've ever seen in the NHL in years. Like,
yeah, there was no reason for it.
I mean,
no
Bennington
reason.
may have
You
taken
get a
over that
penalty,
last
you end
night.
up getting fined later for it, and then right after he comes out of the penalty box, he serves up mega pizza delivery to 97, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
It's lucky he didn't score. Hit the crossbar, I think.
Tyler's pissed when he swears.
Yeah.
Roussel is my whipping boy right now. He's just frustrating me so much.
As I said, like, we go back to like the production of the bottom six outside of Tyler Mott playing really well, but injured. Brandon Sutter had two or three good games, but other than that, like, the bottom six has Jay Beagle has a goal. Adam Gaudette has 2. Antoine Roussel has 1. Zach McEwen has 1. Jake Virtanen has 1. Louis Eriksson doesn't have any. Like, there's nothing. Like, there's nothing going on in that bottom six that leaves me any. When they're out there, I'm like, oh, great. All right, come on. Just don't get scored on. Then we can get the top line out and maybe have a chance. Like, that's how I feel. And that is a complete. That is Jim Benning. That is Jim Benning's bottom six that he's created, drafted, signed, traded for, and it's not good enough. Not even close.
I'm with you. And with you. So it'll be an interesting week, back to back against Winnipeg, Monday, Tuesday, and then Toronto comes in a little bit later for their 4:00, because apparently, Devin, I guess Leaf fans, the curfew is 10 Eastern, but whatever, we'll leave that for now.
We need our sleep.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's quickly move on to the Flames here. We have our Flames poll as well. Where they're at. So the Flames actually, overall, they had a pretty good week point-wise. They beat the Leafs with Markstrom out. They had a 1-0 lead and blew a point against Toronto in game 2. And then they had the disastrous game against Ottawa. And then the bubble lines came back, which were Monahan, Gaudreau, and Lindholm. And then you had the 3M line back of Backlund, Kachuk, and Mangiapane. And they rolled. And then Bennett, Lucic, and Dubé. And then you had Glenn Godden, Nordstrom, and Buddy. His name is actually Charles Robinson together. The third. Thank you. But according to the poll here, how confident are the Flames can build on their 6-3 win over the Senators? A lot of feeling is it's just a blip. So the consistency, again, is an issue. The trust factor in the Flames market is a narrative. Is not there. Devin, how did you feel? Like, we'll start with Devin. How do you feel that they're back to the bubble lines?
I mean, they're going back to what was successful and what made them successful. And you wanted to try and switch it up this year, and you figured out that Lindholm is a great number 1 center. But outside of that, no one is really rolling. Johnny, who was trying with the rotating right winger on that line, wasn't really finding any chemistry. So it makes sense, and obviously it paid off. They played decently well. They played very, very well, actually. Like the shots were indicative of their play. Halfway through the first period, it was 10-4 for Calgary, and then halfway through the second, it was 29-19. And it just, to me, shots aren't everything, but it shows that the time on attack is there, that they're actually out of their defensive zone, which seemed to be impossible for them to do within the past 5 to 6 games. So they just need to show the consistency to move forward and fight for a playoff spot. And if they don't show the consistency, then it doesn't look good for them. They're I believe a couple. What is it? They're 1 point back of Montreal. Montreal has 2 games in hand, and that's for the 4th spot in the Canadian division. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility that they're able to take Montreal for that spot. But I think with the lines, you just gotta keep on coming out and just showing that you care, really, and having that hard work, playing the right way, making sure that you don't make stupid plays. You get the puck out when you need to, and so all the cliches that are out there, that's what they need to do. And the cliches are cliche for a reason, because it's fucking true.
Yeah, I voted on that poll. It was just just a blip. I wasn't sure. It feels to me for sure certainly felt like a comfort level being back to their normal lines. It feels like Kachuk is more comfortable with Backlund, and Monahan and Gaudreau seem more comfortable with Lindholm. So maybe that feels better. I know that this wasn't plan A, but I guess we'll have to see what's happening. Not to be picky here, but the 3 goals that they allowed were on the power play. I think Gio was on the ice for all 3 of them, by the way. And I think he's been on the ice for 7 goals. There were 7 of the last 10 goals. Giordano and Anderson have been on the ice, I want to say, for at least Gio's been on the ice for 7 of them. I'll have to look that up again. So there's still some things I'm still concerned about. So
to Gio's credit, though, he played pretty well. He was actually a leader by leading by example. And that's what he's been good at. So yeah, it's only 1 game, but the consistency within the past 5-6 games, it's been fucking terrible for that pairing.
Yeah, and I guess this is the frustration though too. Is you mean even after the Oilers 7-1 game, you went out and played the Leafs a really hard, heavy game. After that, you get these rebound responses, but they don't stay consistent.
No.
You get your ass handed to you, and then you come back and play better for 1 game, and then you're back to getting your ass handed to you. So that's where the problem is. But I mean, at least Gio told Logan Brown to go back to the gym.
Very true, and hilarious clip. I'm happy that the mics caught that, because that's phenomenal. And then Gio chirping Brady Tkachuk at the end of the game there too is fantastic. And it's panning to Matthew on the bench there, just chuckling. I thought that was phenomenal. But really, realistically, that game was against the worst team potentially in the NHL. They're a hardworking team, yes, and they showed resilience, which is good for the Flames to kind of build on. Because I was worried that after being up 3-0, and then Hanifin takes that penalty, that would get them back in the game. That would get Ottawa back in the game. And, good on the Flames for showing that resilience and being able to essentially put them away. But once again, my point is that you have to think that if you're going to build on something, it would be good to do it on a shittier team with Ottawa, because you're playing Ottawa 2 more times.
Twice more, yeah. And
twice more than a game off, and then another Ottawa game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they got the Oilers on Saturday, and then the Ottawa again.
So Edmonton, that game is going to be highlighted on my schedule to see exactly how well they'll play against the McDavid and Draisaitl team.
Yep. Yeah. The only other thing that the heat is still on. It was nice to have the win. It's nice to get that monkey over here just for a little bit and let him kind of play a little bit. And kudos, I think, for David Rittich. I think he had the tough game against Ottawa, but I think overall he's had a pretty good week. I think that's a good sign. The only other thing I really wanted to just quickly touch on here was Ryan Pinder and Eric Francis had a bit of a tete-a-tete about Johnny Gaudreau on Monday. We didn't get a chance to talk about this on the midweek intermission, but basically Pinder challenged what Eric. It came down to if Johnny Gaudreau was going to sign a contract back with Calgary in 2 seasons from now. Pinder was like, Johnny wants to stay here, and Eric was like, he's not staying here, he's leaving. From my perspective, I think the thing that I appreciate, I'm starting to appreciate now, is I'm starting to see finally this year, and yes, it's a different year. We keep saying that, but there seems to be some passion from the Flames fan market about where this team is going. One, and two, there seems to be some media voices that are not willing to just buy into the management narrative and start asking some really hard questions about this organization. And I think it's about time on both ends of that.
Yeah, Pinder, I've said this multiple times within the past month, that Pinder is that voice that would push back against anybody. If he thinks that you're not being fair and you're not having a level-headed discussion about what is actually going on here, then he'll tell you what's up. And he did that with Francis, and I listened to that live. It was phenomenal. If you haven't heard it, you definitely need to go check it out, which I'm sure most of you already have. But yeah, he just challenged Francis and saying, is that an opinion, or do you know that for fact? And
and it's amazing because I mean they're Sportsnet colleagues, and you got one sort of criticizing the credibility of the other. It's like, well, boy, it's a sign of how bad the situation is with the Flames when you've got that going on in the media.
Yeah, I just I'll retweet it from my account here. I don't know if I could play that on air. I'd rather not take the heat for that. So, but yeah, and not only that, Rhett Warner as well has been like, I listened to him live with Elliot Friedman, and his blast about Sam Bennett was on point as well. I'll retweet that as well because that was something as well. But it's good from that sense that we're starting to see sort of some real questions being asked in an organization, and it's not just Eric Francis that is the only insider in Calgary.
No, and yeah, you got to think that you got to find somebody to push back, and having them as colleagues, I think, really shows the credibility of Ryan Pinder and how he just says what's on his mind, and that's why he's controversial. So if you don't listen to him in the morning on Fan 960, it is a good listen, especially unfortunately with TSN losing the radio stations, and even if you're not a Flames fan, like they just have an entertaining vibe within them. They talk hockey, and they talk even Boomer. I like Boomer's takes as well, and I feel like he isn't really an apologist to the Flames either.
I don't have a whole lot to add, but the one thing I will add is that it's high time that someone finally called Francis on his bullshit.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, he Eric, just very quickly, it gets pretty careless with the way he phrases things, and Pinder, I think, rightfully pointed that out. Don't say something as if it's fact when it's just your own speculation. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to speculate that Johnny Gaudreau's not going to re-sign with the Flames, but make that clear to your audience that's just the speculation that's out there. Don't say that's not going to happen as if you know that to be true. And if you know that to be true, what are you hiding from everybody?
It kind of almost parallels a little bit in the Vancouver market, kind of like a Botchford versus like Gallagher almost sort of conflict of ideas. Like Gallagher is kind of like the Francis one, whereas like the one that tends to have the more outlandish takes, and then the Botchfords that tend to be more of the actual voice of the fandom, or at least that's my perspective on it.
For me, Tony Gallagher is nowhere near Eric Francis.
I'm not saying direct comparison, just in the same atmosphere.
Tony Gallagher was highly. I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong. I've always been a Tony Gallagher fan. He sort of had he was Matt Sakaris before Matt Sakaris was Matt Sakaris. But he just, I see what you're saying, but I just think Gallagher just had a higher level of intellectual honesty. He was not
other than him being a Gillis apologist, he's had a pretty good career as a hockey writer.
Fair.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that they're on the same level. I was just trying to illustrate a point.
Fair. I get it. But I still think the heat is on this team. I still think a lot of questions are there to be answered. I mean, again, I mean, we talk. I'll just say this again very quickly. Jim Benning, one playoff series in 7 years. Brad Treliving, one playoff series win in 7 years. And if Ward is removed, 4 coaches. So I just, I'm sorry. We're gonna put Benning on that hot seat. I think Brad Treliving deserves that hot seat just as much as Jim Benning.
I wouldn't go that far, but sure.
I would.
Yeah. Just a quick.
At least Tree Living has shown that he's able to do shit and he's able to fucking go here. You want to bring this up again? Good lord. Fuck.
Did Bittens get a haircut, or is he just extra dapper today?
I did get a haircut recently. Yes.
Hashtag Noble Nation is here.
I had the haircut last weekend there, Clarky. Where the hell were you? Miss you, buddy.
I always love the term man rocket too. And Tyler, you're a man rocket.
Oh, I don't know, fellas.
Flip it. I always want to keep that up there forever. Anything else on the Flames? I didn't feel like this was a hugely eventful week, and I didn't have a huge rant on them. But I didn't,
Well, that's just kind of how it goes in this pandemic season. Week to week, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be really bad. Next week you might be ranting about the Flames again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because last Sunday was a bit of a shit show, right? So, as far as Flames fans and how we felt, a week ago. So, even 2 weeks ago for the Canucks fans until now, it's kind of similar.
Well, there's still one more thing we need to talk about.
Oh yeah, we do need to talk about this.
Which Tkachuk would you choose?
Keith, all the way.
Oh my god.
I'm
that dead heat too, right?
I'm really liking the amount of votes that Taryn got too.
Yeah.
If you ask Matthew or Brady, I'm pretty sure they would pick Taryn anyways. So.
Yeah.
Watching them doing their quarantine stuff and then them trying to play field hockey, as someone who played field hockey at a somewhat high Canadian level, which isn't actually very good. It was quite entertaining for me. So, but yeah, I've made my opinion known on this. I think Brady, B Tkachuk, the B stands for better. I know Devin hates that, so I just keep
that's
sweating
just
it out.
Move there.
Yeah, pretty much.
I would probably, of the two, I would pick Matthew. I just think I think Brady gets frustrated quicker right now. I think Brady still needs some more maturity in his game. So right now I would pick Matthew, but ask me again in 3 years. I may change my mind.
When Brady's a captain and Matthew isn't.
Jesus Christ, man. All right.
Look what you've done, Sean.
Oh, my God. I'd say
the Patrick Laine. This is where you need the Patrick Laine clip. Don't listen to him. He's a pigeon. Right there, Sean. Right. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, you know what? I'm probably gonna get fucking shell shocked for this, but I think Brady Tkachuk is better overall. I think he has the size. He's leading the league in shots and hits. I just think that with that big body, once he figures out and he actually has a team around him that actually can help him out a little bit. I think that he is better, but not by much. Matthew Tkachuk, he's a smart player. I think he's smarter than Brady. You have to be with his size, with Tkachuk, Matthews' size and the way that he skates. But I think overall, if I was going to make a team, I'd get Brady Tkachuk.
Did not expect to hear that. I'll plead a little bit of ignorance as far as not paying too much attention to Brady. So I appreciate the rattiness of Matthews' game more. Like just the Kessler comparisons, especially when Kessler was in his prime. Like I think I would prefer that style of player more, but I also hear the arguments for Brady. I just haven't watched him nearly enough to actually have a solid opinion on him.
And no one can call me a fucking homer now. So
It's fascinating. Interesting. I mean, it's
that still.
I'm just like, what the hell? Who has kidnapped Devin anyway? Devin, is there anything quickly you wanted to talk? We didn't put the Leafs on the agenda, but is there anything quickly you wanted to talk to them about? I mean,
everyone needs to relax. Matthews is fine. They said it on yesterday that it was just precautionary. That if it was a playoff game or if the Leafs were trying to battle for a spot, that he would be playing. But real interested to see what line combinations they'll come back with when Matthews is back, because that top line yesterday was rolling with Marner, Tavares, and Thornton. I would kind of like to see that stay together going forward. So then you'd have Matthews and Nylander together. But the one thing that really baffled me yesterday was on that second line, they had Barabanov instead of Zach Hyman on the left side. And that just didn't really make much sense to me. Even though that third line that they had was Mikheyev, Pierre Engvall, and Hyman, and that third line was rolling. So solid win. Happy to see Jack Campbell back, and he was playing very well, very solid in that net. So just keep on rolling.
Yep. I'm sure Hockey Night in Canada was more than thrilled that the Leafs decided to not have Auston Matthews play as Connor McDavid. I'm sure that the bottom of their heart, they were like, we put this at 7:00 Eastern, and you decided to scratch Matthews on a Saturday. Thank you, Leafs.
Yeah, they'll get another chance on Wednesday in their national broadcast at 8:00 Eastern time to get that matchup again.
Yeah. Anyway.
And where was McDavid? I don't know. It was a -3? -2?
On the Oilers, very quickly. I mean, they had a pretty good run there. I think they were bound to have a clunker at some point, and that's what happened there last night. I expect they'll bounce back for the next game for sure.
Yeah.
Once again, it's whether or not Smith can steal another couple of games or so. He plays really well when he gets a lot of shots. If you look at the majority of his shutouts, and when he plays really well, he gets 30+ shots a game. So maybe he can continue this play. Who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And then you may get Koskinen Monday. I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to Koskinen at some point here.
Yeah.
So quickly, other news that we wanted to get into. Are you believing any of the Jack Eichel trade rumors?
No, not at this point. That's a massive trade. Unless you're finding a fit like the Line A Dubois trade where you're doing 1-for-1, I think it's too complicated to do in season in a normal season, let alone in this weird season that includes quarantines and everything like that.
No, it's too soon. They still have a good. They still have some good young players there. You have Rasmus Dahlin. You still have Sam Reinhart over there. I don't believe him just yet, but I think that the same thing that we talked about with McDavid is that eventually, I think those type of players that want to win, they get fed up, and I think that down the road he would start pressing the panic button and be like, get me the fuck out of here, which would be a massive blow for Buffalo, depending on who's coming back the other way. And Buffalo is such a meat and potatoes type of fan base, and they just love their team, and it's a good hockey market. It's just it hasn't worked out for them really well. And you thought that getting Jack Eichel, getting Dahlin, getting Sam Reinhart, when you have Ristolainen in there too, that they would be able to be better than they actually are. But it really hasn't worked out for him. So down the road, I could definitely see it, but not right now.
Is he frustrated? Does he potentially want out? Sure. But do I think that they're actually going to do a trade this season, not a chance.
Yeah, I don't see it this year. But Tyler?
Ristolainen, just before Tyler goes, Ristolainen's just coming back from a very, very tough battle with COVID. So I think they're in a very similar spot as the Canucks, where there's not much room, if any, to do anything this season. But if they can build some momentum going into next season with the emergence of Cousins, they've got Ristolainen. Dahlin is coming back to what he should be, being a top pick. I think they can build on that going into next season once the divisions are back to normal and they aren't in a one hell of a division that they got thrown into this year.
I'm not really up on this situation as much as you guys are probably, but it does surprise me that there would be this discussion around Eichel. I mean, they made, he was a top draft pick. He was they've made him the captain of the team. So a little surprised by this, but they should be listening. Should always be listening if there's a compelling offer that comes their way.
Well, this started with Canucks Twitter friend Elliot Friedman going on to a Buffalo radio station and saying that he brought up something about it. So I think that's where this is all come for. So, so he's not only after Canucks, he's not only trolling Canucks Twitter, he is trolling.
Yeah, he has more fun doing that than with other Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Oilers entertainment groups, or there was a report of a tweet sent out this morning that is interesting. Hearing from multiple sources that OEG is putting forth a 50-page proposal to AH to allow a limited number of fans to attend games. The hope is to have people in the building as early as April, if and when the province is able to get the step 3 of its plan to move forward. I'm sure that there's going to be some people in Alberta that are going to, as Alberta Twitter and Alberta Ledge and Alberta political Twitter is, that's just going to react very calm and rationally to this tweet, for sure.
If shit a brick is calm and rational, then that.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, people are getting vaccinated and people are still angry there in Alberta. I just, anyway. But I'll start on this and say that and it may be my opinion on this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I think we have got to find a way to start figuring out when fans can come back to the stands. Like, I don't think that we can. I don't think it is. We got to see where this goes. Like, we got to at least say, okay, what can we do starting next year? Starting even April. I think for a lot of people, this is getting very tiring that we are not seeing opportunities for people to get out and do some of the things that they want to do, which includes going to a hockey game, going to a pub for a hockey game, just going out and being part of the community in whatever the way that they can. So I am going to be open-minded about this and say, let's see where this goes. And I'm going to recommend that there's no panic on it, and let's see how this works, and then we can move forward.
You talk about, what can we do next season? What can be done for the playoffs this season, right? I mean, if they're able to get fans in there in Alberta, or in April, that's about a month before the playoffs would begin. So, that timeline, there's some logic behind that timeline.
Absolutely.
Trying to feel it out, right?
Well, the
other thing is
I have an echo. Sorry.
I was going to say, the other thing is that this will only they'll only, when you read the tweet, it's about if we get to step 3 here in Alberta. Right now we're in step 1, and I don't know if we're actually going to get to step 2 in any. I think they're supposed to be making a decision this upcoming week on whether or not they go to step 2, which would just allow a slowly opening a few things more.
And if implemented, that wouldn't open things up until March 8th at the earliest, and then there's another 3 weeks after that if we pass the numbers for phase 2.
Yeah. So, you're looking at for me, you're looking at beginning of April at the very, very earliest, and I think realistically, you're looking at mid-April, past mid-April for something like this to be able to, or there's to be able to do this.
There's definitely going to be pushback with with my industry that I'm in. Where Kalen and I are very lucky that we're able to be open right now because it is a one-on-one gym that we own, and you're definitely going to get the pushback from other people saying like, okay, well, you're proposing this before, say for instance, pubs are able to have more than 6 people at a table from different households. Just as an example, I don't know. It's just surprising hearing that coming out when we're still in this stage, and it's a good thought process to have for sure, and to be ahead of that and getting the approval from AHS saying like, okay, well, if the numbers are this and we have this implemented of masks wearing at all times, we're socially distancing seats, then yeah, go ahead, go forward with it, but doesn't mean that it's going to actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, in general, it seems like the Alberta government has been, more can-do attitude about trying to have sporting events happen, and the next stage would obviously be making sporting events happen with fans. So it doesn't surprise me that this comes out. And if you're going to try and implement something like that, you got to start proposing it now, I think. So, but I mean, your points are well taken, Devin, and those, that your points are coming from the real world.
Yeah, the consistency on this overall with COVID, not only in this situation, but what can and cannot be open and what we can and cannot do, it is honestly confusing for a lot of people. And I think that there's going to be, I think we are getting to the point in general where people are are legitimately getting frustrated by what is going on. And now I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I don't think that we've been as forward thinking as we possibly could have been throughout this. I think that there's been opportunities for us to solve a problem here. And we've been more like, well, let's just wait and see, and there's not much that we can do, as opposed to let's kind of figure out, we need to start making plans going forward. Like if you're a hockey team, if you're a business, and Devin can probably speak to this being a business owner, you got to start thinking ahead. Like it's like, so that's where I'm not so I'm not irate about this. I think that's why I'm in the position where I think we need to keep an open mind.
I definitely agree with the open mind part of it. The only stipulation that I would say is like, unless they're fully vaccinated, I just don't see how that's not going to end horribly. Especially with the fact that the variants, which are more transmissible, are currently spiking despite the general downward trend in Alberta for our numbers. So without being fully vaccinated, I just don't see that being a smart move. I'm all for being optimistic and exploring options and trying to figure out how to get past this. I'm all for that. I just think we need to be grounded and realistic about this and treat it with as much precaution as possible.
You got to be worried about the message that it sends to the broader public, if this goes ahead, right? Because that's for sure going to create a level of complacency around COVID and keeping your guard up and doing all the things we're trying to do to stay safe here, right? If you say, well, they have fans at hockey games, must not be that bad anymore. That would be the concern.
If you thought the belligerent anti-maskers in Alberta were bad before, during like stricter lockdowns, imagine how they would act with that.
Yeah.
But there's I just think that there already is. We're already at a point of complacency with COVID. Like I really like I
agree.
We're already there.
I think it might make it worse.
I want to go back to the fact that it is for step 3. And the potential easings in step 3 is adult team sports, casinos, racing centers, and bingo halls, indoor social gatherings with restrictions, indoor seated events, movie theaters, and other things like that, libraries, museum, art galleries, zoos, interpretive centers, and places of worship. If that's the stuff that they're easing in step 3, having restricted very, very minimal fans in these in arenas would fall under that.
Yeah.
Now you can agree or disagree on that, on whether or not that we should be doing that at step 3. But if they're doing that, but they're not letting it, and the Alberta government doesn't allow for very limited fans to go watch games, Oilers games, Flames games, if that step hits in this season, I have a hard time. And again, this goes back to what Kevin said, the picking and choosing of what are restricted, what isn't, can be confusing at times. So for me, I don't mind them trying to do this, but again, you still have to do everything right. You still have to do all the protocols. It's still going to have to be very, very minimal amount of people in that arena. And you still, otherwise, what Chris said is the risk is the potential for the risk to being too high and to create an issue past that is there.
I agree with I understand what Chris is saying, and I am in agreement with it. But I think, and I'm not saying just go forward and say fuck it. There needs to be some thought through this, but a thought of going forward needs that's where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm open minded to that. Let's see where this is going.
And like I said, I'm totally open to that too.
Yeah,
I think that the timing of the tweet, they probably if they probably should have left it alone. I don't think they should have made that public. I'm all for giving hope within this time that is unprecedented. Fuck, I hate that word. But it just, I feel like until it's 100% there, having this out there just causes more controversy, and which is okay, I guess. But I don't know. I just don't think that they should have said anything until it was 100% approved by the AHS, and that is a big if it is approved by AHS.
Well, this tweet came from Tom Gazzola from TSN 1260 in Edmonton. So this wasn't the Oilers putting it out there. This was him reporting it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, right? However it gets out, I don't think it should have been brought out as of yet until it is concrete that this is going to happen.
Yeah. Fair. And the one, before, not to derail this on one point I do want to make is that I think that the government and everything have not done a good enough job at helping people find ways to make this work. They're throwing money at the problem. We're seeing that doesn't necessarily work. And we're talking about mental health and breaks from this, all that, just how frustrating and downtrodden this whole thing has been. And even if it doesn't come to the fact that even if the Alberta government doesn't say yes to this proposal, I think we need to start have more people thinking of ways to help people get through this. That doesn't involve just throwing money at the problem.
Yep, I agree. By the way, Chris, we got a compliment here. I like seeing Chris again. Regular viewer, Parallax Prophecy, saying hello.
Nice to be appreciated.
Yes. Two other quick things here. Tim and Sid no more. It's now Tim and Friends, as 660 is starting a couple weeks now to Breakfast Television in Toronto, and Tim is going to have guests until Tim figures out what Tim is going to do.
Yeah, that was a very emotional goodbye from Sid, and definitely made me tear up. And it's end of an era, back to all the way to 2004, where Facebook had less than 1 million followers,
and there was no YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a sad day to see, but really hope the best for Sid going forward, and really curious to see how Tim navigates. I mean, it's not gonna be that hard. He's a fantastic. It's a fantastic show that he's on, and I'm just curious on what direction they eventually go in, because I don't think it's always going to be Tim and Friends. They'll find another suitable co-host for Tim and whoever.
Yeah, they're in good hands with Tim McAuliffe. They'll definitely figure that out. But congratulations to the two of them on a great run. I mean, some humble beginnings there with the Score, working out of a hotel in Toronto at the Holiday Inn, and working their way up to become a fairly big budget show. I would guess that was both on radio and TV in a prime slot. So it was a heck of a run. But it has to be pointed out in a short period of time here, we went from having Jay and Dan on one network, Tim and Sid on the other, and now neither of those exist anymore. So that part is disappointing.
And Tim and Sid did give a shout out to Jay and Dan on their final show as well.
Right on.
Yeah,
good to hear.
And then the other thing I wanted to get into here, I mean, it is the Blue Jays, but I do think that this will affect hockey. The Sportsnet has announced that for this year anyway, they're going to be simulcasting the TV and the radio broadcast. So it'll be Buck Martinez and Dan Schulman doing both. And they have experience doing both. But I think it is a very... the reason I wanted to bring this up is this is something that I'm curious what happens with hockey, because I could see them taking that step if things don't turn around financially.
Mm-hmm. I believe the Carolina Hurricanes were the most recent one to go that route. I don't know if they're still doing that. One of the realities with the pandemic is that there's not a lot of people commuting for work. So that core listenership of people listening in the car is lost. And, when you're looking to cut costs, and that's something that the bean counters are going to look at and say, is it money well spent? Well, it's not as well spent as it was before, but that's one of those the toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube type of things. I think once they go this route and it seems it just sort of gains acceptance by people, do they ever go back? I don't know. That's a concern for me. I mean, even more broadly, I mean, here we have regional hockey games being called off monitors, in large quantity. I'm concerned that's going to stick around in post-pandemic here too. So there's some legitimate questions to be asked here as they experiment on these kinds of things.
Innovation and change always happens, though. So I guess to a certain degree, we have to, allow and accept that. But yeah, I fully see the concern as well.
I don't think this is an innovation at all. I think this is just full on cutting corners and finding a way to cut out.
But it will lead
some
to innovation.
But the whole point is that how you call a game on TV and how you call a game on radio is different.
Yeah,
because you've got graphics, you've got visual to help you tell the story when you're calling the game on TV, as opposed to audio when you have to basically provide the picture for the listener. It's not the same. It's not the same as skill set.
Yeah,
it's a different skill set. I think Kevin would be the best. Kevin and Tyler would be. You guys have the best views on this because you're Kevin's working through going through your schooling, and Tyler, you worked in TV for a bit. It's a completely different skill set. To me, it's like ranting off the cuff, or ranting off of a script, or reading off a script, or reading what you've written out versus just doing it off of memory. It's completely different. And
in baseball, fans are really, really up in arms about it, because I think the difference between a baseball radio and television broadcast is more so than a hockey radio and television broadcast. I mean, hockey, I think the structure kind of stays the same. There's just more description of the play as it's going on. But baseball, it's so much about storytelling and filling that dead air. In baseball on a TV broadcast, you've got the crowd and things. You can let it breathe a little bit. But baseball, it's a constant conversation, and they kind of work in, slider away for ball one, and they just kind of worked the actual game into the conversation, right? Vin Scully was the last one, I think, that did a simulcast with the Dodgers. He worked by himself, but when you watched on TV, it was just this conversation as the game's going on. And so I mean, I don't think it'll work at all. Whereas a hockey TV radio simulcast, I mean, we've seen lots of that in the past, and I'm sure we'll see it again.
Peter Marr, yeah, baby. John Short in the house. They slayed the Red Dragon. Tom Cheek. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit another one in your life. Vin Scully, Dave Niehaus, my oh my for the Seattle Mariners. A radio play-by-play announcer is so important to the market. And like, it's not only for us people that are able-bodied that are able to see. It's for blind people. It's for seniors. It's for those that do not live in a major city and in a major market. That is how the Blue Jays became Canada's team. Is because of the radio broadcast. Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth were, when I was growing up, and I'm sure I'm waiting for Devin's little witty remark after this, but Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth were one of the reasons that I was following the Blue Jays, because they were not on TV all the time. So we had the radio to listen to, right? So that it's such a, I do not think that this is a good decision at all. And I'm very concerned that they're going to bring this into hockey. And I think it's a dumb decision. It's a very dumb decision. Don't do it, Devin. Don't do it. Don't.
I agree with Kev.
We're Devin being the youngest here. We're all in our 30s now, and I think I grew up listening to sports on the radio. I remember listening to Peter Maher calling Flames games growing up here in Calgary, and as well as when I went to visit family in Vancouver. I would listen to the radio there, whether it was Mariners games or Canucks games. Like, it's like Jim Robson, Jim Houston,
again, the Trevor Linden call.
Yeah, like it's there, right? And it's part. I don't know what the. I know I'm going to sound really old now. I don't know what the kids are doing these days for when they get sent to bed. Do they have their tablets and they're watching the game in bed, or they're actually listening to the radio? Because how many people actually have an analog radio in their house anymore?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's through apps now, as opposed to sitting at a radio.
Yeah, but even then, right? It's just. I don't know, but I do agree with Kevin that it is a big part. Even as an adult, like as Tyler pointed out, you have people who are driving home from work or commuting home from work, or even listening to the game on the radio at work. Say you're working in a small warehouse, or you're working in an office that doesn't have it's not super busy, but you still have to be there. You have that on in the background. You're working in the kitchen. You have it on in the background.
Yeah,
like it's part of sports, and like I said, it's a completely different skill set to be doing play by play with visual aids as opposed to just audio.
I do want to restipulate earlier, like, I was trying to do it from like a glass half full, trying to see the silver lining sort of perspective on the whole potential for change and innovation. I'm not trying to say like I think it's a good idea or it's ideal or anything along those lines. I just kind of wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, I get it. I do want to. At some point, I want to dig into these topics a little bit more, because I do think the media landscape in sports right now is in a very, very interesting position. And do I
quite
have
volatile.
some? What's that?
I was saying quite volatile.
Yeah, and oh boy, do I have some opinions that I want to share. But we're not going to go 4 hours here. I just don't have the time. You don't have the time. Devin has to go. Tyler has to go. So we're going to wrap. We're going to end this here, I think, unless there's anything else we need to say. All right. How do we follow everyone?
I am Beardy Canucks 03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at tnoble, TNOBLE.
I'm at Schneids on most social media.
You can follow me on Twitter at Gordhouse09.
KVOLE podcast_hockey, Facebook.com, the hockey podcast, YouTube.com, the hockey podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We will have our midweek intermission. Just will clarify the date. I have a date in mind, but I just want to make sure everybody is okay with it before I announce it. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the comments. Lots of comments as well. And we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.